My name is Julia Winters, and I'm 36 years old. I live in a charming, cream-colored house with a blue roof in a quiet residential neighborhood in Charleston, South Carolina. To any outsider, my life would probably seem like a dream neatly trimmed hedges, a blooming garden of tulips and roses, a loving husband, and a homemaker lifestyle I had embraced with pride for the past 11 years. My husband, Ryan Winters, is 40. He's the regional sales manager for a major biotech company. With his well-maintained dark hair, calm voice, and always polished look, Ryan has a way of charming anyone he meets. In the early days of our marriage, I truly believed I had hit the jackpot. Ryan was sophisticated, driven, and effortlessly charismatic. When our friends came over, they'd tease, "Julia, you really got yourself a gem." I used to laugh, believing we had something rare and unshakable. We got married after dating for nearly 3 years. Back then, I was full of dream skids, holidays, a future filled with love and memories. But as the years passed, the laughter of children never came. We spent 5 years navigating the cruel maze of infertility treatments. From acupuncture and herbal teas to rounds of IVF that drained us emotionally and physically, I gave it everything. Finally, after yet another failed round, the doctor looked at me with gentle eyes and said, "Sometimes, there's only so much science can do." At first, Ryan was supportive. I still remember him holding my hand in the car after that appointment, whispering, "As long as I have you, nothing else matters." But even then, I caught glimpses of sadness in his eyes, especially when he'd watch the neighborhood kids play outside. He never said anything, but the way he looked it left invisible scratches on my heart. Then came the turning point. Both my parents passed away within 6 months of each other. First, my dad suddenly, from a stroke. Then my mom, after a painful battle with cancer. I was their only child, and I inherited everything they had worked for their entire lives: a small, respected property business, 3 rental apartments, and savings accounts that totaled over firstings, in savings accounts that totaled over first phase 850. Ling. It was enough to completely change our lives. We moved into a new house in the best part of town, bought a luxury SUV, and started traveling twice a year to exclusive resorts. At first, I thought all of it, the home upgrades, the vacations, the champagne toasts, was a way to heal. But deep inside, I sensed something else. Ryan started looking at me differently, not with affection, but with interest. He paid more attention to my jewelry, my clothes, the house, the car. Not me, not really. That subtle shift unsettled me in a way I couldn't explain. To everyone else, we were the picture of happiness. Our social media accounts were filled with photo sunset dinners, anniversary gifts, beach trips, but those glossy images hid my growing loneliness. Sometimes, I'd lie awake at night listening to the silence, wondering if wealth had slowly started eroding what we once shared. But I'd push the thought away. After all, Ryan still said sweet things in front of others, still smiled at me, though those smiles started to feel empty, like a habit more than affection. And then came the small but steady crack. Ryan began coming home late, not once or twice, but regularly. At first, he'd text, "Busy with a new project. Don't wait up." I believed him. But soon, the excuses started sounding mechanical, rehearsed. His tone lost its warmth. His messages felt cold. He stopped leaving his phone on the kitchen counter like he used to. Now, it was always in his pocket, locked, notifications hidden. Sometimes, I'd hear him whispering outside on the balcony or down in the garage, his voice low. One evening, I stepped out quietly while he was on the phone. He hung up instantly, his expression shifting into an awkward calm. "Just a work call," he said quickly. "Big meeting tomorrow." But I had heard laughter. A woman's voice, young, sweet, and too familiar for comfort. He also stopped sharing our monthly expenses. "I'll handle it," he'd say when I asked about the joint credit card. "Too many work expenses to track, it's easier this way." When I gently pressed, he got annoyed, brushing me off for the first time in over a decade. That flash of irritation chilled me more than any argument we'd ever had. I felt like a stranger in my own home. Every night, I waited in a living room, lit only by the TV screen, wondering, who is this man? Where is the husband who once held my hand through doctor visits and whispered promises under the stars? Still, I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it was stress. Maybe he was going through something he didn't know how to share. Then came the night of the company event. Ryan hadn't invited me to one of his work parties in months, so when he suddenly suggested I join him for a corporate evening gala at a luxury hotel downtown, I was taken by surprise. I put on my best navy dress, the one he used to say made my eyes stand out, and tried to quiet the unease inside me. The ballroom shimmered with golden lighting, and soft jazz drifted through the air. Ryan moved through the crowd like a seasoned politician, laughing, shaking hands, charming everyone in his orbit. I sipped wine quietly at the edge of the crowd, smiling when expected, but mostly observing. That's when I overheard it. Standing near the bar, I heard Ryan lean close to a younger coworker, his voice lower than usual. "The project in Savannah's almost wrapped up," he said with a smirk. "After that, I'll have more flexibility." The other man chuckled. "You're something else, man. Just make sure she doesn't find out." Ryan's reply chilled me. "Don't worry. It's all under control." Savannah? He had never mentioned anything about a project there, and Savannah was nearly 100 miles away. My heart thudded. I felt like the floor had shifted beneath me, but I didn't say anything. Not yet. On the way home, he held my hand and smiled, like nothing had happened, like we were still that same couple from a decade ago. But the warmth I once felt in his touch had vanished. The doubts that had been gnawing at me for months surged back with renewed force. 3 days later, my best friend, Natalie, who had known me since our freshman year of college, called from Jacksonville, where she worked for a publishing firm. Her voice was hesitant, yet filled with worry. "Julia, I wasn't going to say anything at first because I wasn't sure. But last week I was in Savannah for a conference, and I'm pretty sure I saw Ryan." I stopped breathing. "Where? What was he doing?" "He was at this little cafe near the bus terminal. He wasn't alone. There was a blonde woman with him, maybe in her late 20s. They were sitting close, too close." My stomach twisted. Natalie's voice softened. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the way they looked at each other, it didn't feel like business. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, staring out at the peaceful neighborhood street, wondering who that woman was, wondering how long it had been going on, and, more painfully, wondering how blind I had been all this time. Then something strange happened. Ryan came home early. He stepped through the door, face lit up with unusual energy, carrying takeout and 2 bottles of wine. "Let's get away this weekend," he said brightly. "Just us. I booked a room at a riverside hotel in Biloxi. We need some time, just the 2 of us." I forced a smile. The same man who had avoided weekends with me for a year was suddenly craving romantic getaways? My instincts screamed, but I said yes. That night, after he fell asleep, I sat in bed in the dim glow of the nightstand lamp. I couldn't resist anymore. I reached for his briefcase, the one he never left unattended lately, and quietly opened it. Inside, alongside his laptop and some neatly arranged documents, was a pale blue folder. It was from the Charleston Center for Behavioral Wellness. My hands trembled as I flipped it open. Inside were notes, charts, and psychiatric assessments. And then, I saw my name. Julia Winters, initial review. Behavioral indicators consistent with delusional disorder. My chest tightened. I couldn't breathe. Delusional disorder? I hadn't been to any therapist. I hadn't spoken to any psychologist. Who was diagnosing me behind my back? I put the file back exactly as I found it. Then I curled up on the bedroom floor, knees pressed to my chest, silent tears soaking into my nightgown. My mind raced back through every cold look, every excuse, every night he came home late. The whispers, the distance, the fake project in Savannah, and now this. Was this trip really a romantic gesture? Or a trap? The morning of our trip arrived. The sun was gentle, the sky a crisp blue. but something inside me felt wrong, like I was stepping onto a stage without knowing my lines. Ryan seemed calm, focused, but I caught him checking the rearview mirror far more than usual as we left Charleston behind. After about 2 hours on the road, we pulled into a small, weathered gas station just outside of Hattiesburg, Mississippi. The faded sign read, "Red Oak Stop." Ryan turned to me with a half smile. "Want to grab some water or snacks? I'll fill up the tank." I nodded and stepped out. As Ryan walked to the pump, a young attendant, maybe in his mid-20s, approached. He wore a sun-faded uniform and a baseball cap. His name tag read Eli. He started fueling the car, then slowly made his way toward the passenger window. As he pretended to clean it, he slipped a small folded paper through the narrow opening. Our eyes met for a brief second. His were serious, urgent. Then he walked off as if nothing had happened. Heart racing, I opened the paper under cover of the dashboard. "You need to get out of here. He's lying to you. Don't ask. Don't wait." I froze. My first instinct was denial. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe Eli confused me with someone else. But in my heart, I already knew this wasn't a mistake. Ryan's behavior. The medical file. The woman in Savannah. This was something bigger. When Ryan returned to the car, he said casually, "Go ahead and get something from the store. I'll be just a minute here." With the note crumpled in my fist, I walked into the store pretending to browse. My eyes searched for the attendant. I spotted Eli at the far end of a narrow hallway. He motioned for me to follow. I hesitated, then followed. We slipped out a back door, standing in the alley between a row of dumpsters and an old ice machine. Eli looked at me with firm sincerity. "I don't want to scare you, ma'am, but I couldn't just stand by. That man, your husband, he was here a few weeks ago." I blinked. "What do you mean?" "He was with a blonde woman. They were close, definitely not just coworkers. But it's not just that. I overheard them talking. She asked him, 'What about your wife?' And he said," Eli took a breath. "Once this trip is over, it'll all be done. Then we can take everything." My hands went cold. Eli continued. "Then this morning, he came back alone. I heard him on the phone saying, 'The hospital forms are finalized. She won't have another chance to stop this.'" I felt the ground tilt. The folder, the fake diagnosis, the sudden trip. It was all part of something calculated. Eli's voice dropped to a whisper. "You can't go back to that car. If you want, I'll drive you to the nearest sheriff's station. But you need to decide now." Then came Ryan's voice from outside the store. Louder this time. "Julia, where are you?" My breath caught in my throat. I looked at Eli. "Help me," I whispered. He nodded, and we slipped out through the side exit. His truck was parked around the corner, a beat-up old blue Ford. As he helped me in, we heard Ryan's footsteps hurrying around the corner. Eli started the engine. Dust rose from the tires as we peeled away. Through the rearview mirror, I saw Ryan running after the truck. His face wasn't confused or worried. It was furious. And that's when I knew. Everything I had feared was real. Eli drove us about 30 miles through winding roads until we reached the small town of Laurel Ridge. My hands were still trembling when we pulled into the parking lot of the sheriff's department. Inside, we were met by a calm, sharp-eyed female officer named Deputy Harper. I told her everything, the strange folder, the conversation at the company party, Natalie's call, and Eli's warning. She listened carefully, then said, "Julia, based on what you've shared, we can't arrest him right now, but we can file a detailed report. I recommend you request an emergency protective order as soon as possible and get in touch with a lawyer or private investigator." Eli didn't leave me stranded. He took me to stay with a friend of his, a retired nurse named Martha, who lived in a small house near the river. She welcomed me with kindness and not a single question. That night, I called Natalie again. I finally told her everything. Natalie didn't hesitate. "I know a guy," she said. "A private investigator. Legit. Trustworthy. I'll connect you." The next morning, I met Mark Bennett, a former law enforcement officer now working in private investigation out of Baton Rouge. He was in his early 50s, with silver hair and steady eyes that didn't flinch. He listened in silence, then nodded. "I'll dig into Ryan Wintersh's records, property holdings, employment history. There's something off here, and I'll find it. 3 days later, he called me back. I need to meet you in person. What I found, it's worse than we thought. Back in his office, he laid a thick folder on the table and pulled out a glossy photo. It was Ryan only, the name wasn't Ryan Winters. His real name is Eric Lawton, Mark said. He's been living a double life for over a decade. The photo showed Eric, me husband with a blonde woman and 2 kids, standing outside a suburban home in Jackson, Mississippi. The woman was Amanda Latana's legal wife. The children, twins, looked about 9 years old. I felt my knees buckle. Mark's voice was steady. He married her 2 years before he met you. He's been going back and forth ever since, using different job assignments to travel and maintain both identities. My heart shattered. While I was waiting in fertility clinics, crying over negative test results, he was raising children with another woman. But it got worse. Mark continued. They've been planning to take over your inheritance. I subpoenaed Eric's call records and bank transfers. He's been paying a psychiatrist named Dr. Leonard Ross to fabricate medical records about you, building a false case to have you institutionalized. He handed me a transcript, my name, diagnoses, payment receipts. I had to grip the table to stop my hands from shaking. Mark leaned forward. With your permission, I'll forward all of this to the authorities, and you'll need a tough, no-nonsense lawyer. I know just the one. I nodded, eyes burning. I'm ready, whatever it takes. With Mark's help, I was introduced to Catherine Doyle, a formidable attorney based in Baton Rouge, known for handling high-stakes marital fraud and financial abuse cases. She welcomed me into her office and neatly organized, books stacked in deliberate rows, and listened to every detail without a single interruption. When I showed her the files Mark had gathered, her eyes narrowed. This is more than betrayal, Julia. This is premeditated financial exploitation, bigamy, and attempted forced institutionalization. She wasted no time. That very day, we filed an emergency motion to freeze all joint accounts and any property co-owned by Ryan, or rather Eric. Within 48 hours, the court approved the freeze. Then, Catherine filed formal criminal complaints in both Mississippi and Louisiana. Charges included bigamy, fraud, and conspiracy to commit psychiatric false imprisonment. Eric had no idea what hit him. 3 days later, police located him hiding in a short-term rental outside Lafayette, Louisiana. He was arrested without incident. Amanda, his first wife, was also detained under suspicion of conspiracy and aiding fraud. I still remember the first day of court. Eric walked in, wearing an orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed. He looked at me, but not with shame. With disbelief. He had expected me to fall apart. Instead, I sat at the plaintiff's table beside my attorney, eyes forward, holding every piece of truth in my hands. The courtroom was packed. Local reporters, photographers, people who couldn't believe a man had pulled off 2 marriages, 2 lives, for over a decade. The evidence was overwhelming. The forged psychiatric documents, the secret bank payments, the birth certificates of the children he had hidden, phone call recordings between Eric and Amanda discussing taking what's hers and having her declared unfit. Catherine stood tall as she laid it all bare. Your Honor, this is not just a marriage gone wrong. This is a cold, calculated betrayal. A woman's trust and life weaponized by the man she loved. After 3 long months, the judge delivered the verdict. Eric Lawton, 7 years in federal prison. Amanda Lawton, 3 years for her role in the conspiracy. As the gavel came down, I didn't feel rage. I didn't even feel triumph. I felt release. Later that month, I sold the Charleston house and used what remained of my protected inheritance to buy a modest cottage in Fairhope, Alabama, near the coast. It was quiet. The sea air was warm. I could breathe again. For the first time in years, I was living not in fear, but in freedom. My new life in Fairhope, Alabama started quietly. Each morning, I'd sit on my porch with a cup of coffee, watching the waves crash in the distance. I wasn't the same woman who once clung to a crumbling marriage. The pain had carved something stronger inside me, a clarity I had never known before. One afternoon, while walking past the local library, I noticed a flyer on the community board. Support group for victims of marital fraud and emotional abuse. Join us. Share, heal, reclaim. I stood there for a long moment. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about women like Methos still trapped, still making excuses for someone slowly unraveling their reality. The next morning, I signed up. At the first meeting, I shared my story. My voice trembled, and my hands shook, but I spoke anyway. About the betrayal, about Savannah, about the forged diagnosis, about running from someone I thought would protect me forever. As I spoke, I saw tears in the eyes of strangers, nods of quiet understanding, no judgment, no pity, just connection. And that was the beginning of something beautiful. Over the following months, I began volunteering helping women access legal aid, connecting them with therapists, even speaking publicly about my case. Every time someone said, "Because of your story, I found the courage to leave," it healed a little more of the brokenness inside me. And amid all this, I stayed in touch with a lithe young man at the gas station who had saved my life with just one note. He had returned to New Orleans to finish his degree in mechanical engineering. We messaged often, sometimes called. He was kind, funny, and deeply sincere, qualities I had never fully appreciated in a man until now. One crisp fall afternoon, I got a message from him. "Julia, I just graduated, got a job here in Fairhope. Mom and I would love to have you for dinner. She wants to thank you for trusting me that day." I smiled. The ones who deserved thanks were him and his mother for stepping in when I couldn't save myself. That evening, I drove to their home on the edge of town. It was small but warm. His mother, Linda, hugged me like she had known me for years. We ate a simple dinner, but it was the most genuine evening I'd had in a long time. We laughed, talked about dreams, life, regret, healing. When I got up to leave, Linda held my hand and said quietly, "You helped my son grow up. Thank you for not turning away from him when it mattered most." I smiled back, feeling something deep stir in my chest. It was Eli who saved me, and because of that, I finally learned family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's just people who show up when your world is falling apart. That night, I drove down to the beach. The stars sparkled above the water. I opened the car door just to hear the waves more clearly. I breathed in deeply. I was no longer the woman who had once begged for love from someone who had buried the truth under layers of lies. I was someone else now. Whole. Free. Alive. Looking back, I see clearly. The worst thing that ever happened to me was also the beginning of something better. I lost a man who lied, but I found something far more important. My voice. My strength. My peace. And now, I spend my days walking beside women who once felt just as lost, helping them find the courage to walk away, the power to begin again.